today. This is the second webinar in our Destination Zero series. Of course, for those of you who don't know, Destination Zero is on again. It's back. The second chapter of the Global Climate Change Youth Innovation Challenge is back. And we are thrilled for it to be back, especially right after COP26 to keep momentum. Today in this webinar is going to be covering basically how do you scale sustainably? What is scaling? So scaling is how do you basically stack your innovation and idea? How do you think about the long term? And how do you basically build a business or an innovation or a climate change idea to be in the long term? I think a lot of tech startups have a great idea to launch, but then what's the long-term plan? So today's session is when you're designing your pitch for your climate change innovation and idea, how do you basically make it clear in that pitch of how this idea can last? How does it have legs? And especially if you're one of the lucky recipients, which basically will be announced on December 12th, and you get the money and you basically get the grant from the British Council, how can you use that money and how can you explain how you'll use that money in the long term? So today we're going to be speaking with Lulu O'Connor, a good friend of mine and a former client, but also founder of Clothes Doctor, which is an extremely revolutionary digital first clothing care solution here in the UK. Lulu is a sustainable startup entrepreneur herself. I've had the pleasure of knowing her for years and watching her journey and watching her grow, and it's incredible. And it's amazing how your business really started as one thing with a very clear proposition, and now has really kind of expanded and basically become a lot of things. And I think your story is incredible, and I think you from the get-go have been kind of very committed in wanting to kind of put the UK sustainable startup scene on the map. But Lulu, thank you for joining us today. Welcome.
Hi, Glenn. Great to be here. Thanks for having me. And yeah, really excited to share a little bit about what I've learnt over the last nearly 5 years I've been doing this business. So yeah, can't wait to get stuck in.
Amazing. We're looking forward to the chat and all the lessons that you've had again on scaling and sustainability. But before we get into the chat and before we get started, we do want to just play a quick video. It just explains Destination Zero, explains the campaign, the initiative that the British Council is putting on, and basically what you need to do, basically how you can get involved, what's at stake and what you can win, and also key timings and when you need to get stuff and to get your pitch submitted by. So we're going to play that video now, and then once we're done, we'll get into it with Lulu.
The Destination Zero competition is back, and once again, the British Council is calling all the innovators, thinkers, makers and doers out there to share your ideas and innovations on how to tackle the climate crisis. We first launched the competition in January 2021 and received hundreds of great submissions worldwide. Of those, we selected 10 finalists from the places where voices are often overlooked in the mainstream climate change conversation. These trailblazers were awarded a £5,000 grant and mentorship to develop their innovative ideas, and their journeys continue today. As part of the British Council's Climate Connection campaign, we're pleased to open Destination Zero once again, a youth innovation competition and a call to action for the next generation of climate change innovators on the front lines of climate change. We want to provide a platform where your voice and your ideas can be heard, seen, and brought to life. When it comes to climate change, we all share a common path, fate, and ambition. That is why we're looking to empower today's youth to build their own better future. So, what kind of ideas are we looking for? This time, we're targeting projects that help communities build climate change resilience in the following 3 areas. Urban, innovations that help to transform slums into healthy, clean, and safe cities. Rural, innovations that help rural farmers to adapt to changing climates. Coastal, innovations that protect homes and businesses from climate disasters. Once again, we're looking to support the next generation of innovators, so you must be between 18 to 34 years old to enter. To enter the challenge, please share a 60-second video using the hashtag Destination Zero and hashtag The Climate Connection on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube or TikTok. Please be sure to clearly state your first name, age, and where you're from. Then explain your climate change idea or innovation. The competition is looking for ideas that tackle the 3 impact areas. Nothing is too big or small to share. The challenge runs from the 15th November to the 29th November, but we highly encourage you to submit as soon as possible. If you entered last year, you can submit again, but please demonstrate how your project has progressed, evolved, or moved forward since your previous submission. On the 11th December, we, with the help of a global panel of judges and experts, will announce the top 30 candidates and their submissions, who will be invited to share further information about their concepts. From there, we will select the 10 finalists, with the best proposals receiving a 5-month mentorship and financial support in the form of £5,000 to help bring the idea or innovation to life. Don't forget to submit your video by the 29th November 2021, midnight UK time, using the hashtag Destination0 and hashtag #TheClimateConnection. Once submitted, stay tuned. Destination Zero, an innovation challenge from the British Council's Climate Connection, putting faces to the places at the core of finding real solutions in the climate change conversation. One world, one goal, infinite possibilities.
Amazing. And like I said, as the video states, the deadline for your submissions is this upcoming Monday, the 29th. So make sure that you spend the weekend practicing your pitch, getting ready. We've already seen some really amazing submissions. I've seen a couple on Twitter and also on Instagram that are incredible. I always love watching the videos. It's incredible how much talent, innovation there is in people half my age, which is incredible. But like I said, deadline this Monday. And but today and now we're going to get into it, and why we're here for the second webinar topic, which is about scaling sustainably with Lulu O'Connor, founder of Clothes Doctor. So Lulu, we'll get straight into it. I know your story very well. I feel very near and dear to it. I'm actually wearing a sweater that Clothes Doctor repaired for me. This is one of my favorite. I bought it at a vintage shop, which I love in Notting Hill. Had really nasty moth holes in it, and you guys fix it for me very quick. So I feel very near and dear to your cause. But for the people who don't know you, who are watching this worldwide, tell us about yourself. Give us the whole journey. Tell us about, from start to finish. Who are you? Where do you come from? What were you doing? Where did the light bulb go off in your head to start Clothes Doctor? What basically, how to give us the rewind? Where do you come from, and how did you get to where you are today?
Absolutely, yeah. So my background is, first of all, when I left school, I went into the city, and I was actually working as a financial analyst for a number of years. And I started to get the entrepreneurial bug when I got to around my late 20s. And I really started to feel that urge to do something different. And I got really interested in the fashion industry and the sort of the challenges of the fashion industry, and the fact that, so much of the fashion industry is very unsustainable and very linear. And I started to look at ideas around trying to make it more circular, and what could I do to actually, help people look after their clothes better the way we used to do, 50, 100 years ago. And, with fashion and things, people don't really do it anymore. And actually, so I quit my job, and I took the plunge and set up Clothes Doctor in 2017. And it's been a really interesting journey. And actually, I was delighted to be able to talk to you about particularly focusing on scaling your business, because I feel as if I have had a lot of experience of actually different types of businesses almost, because Clothes Doctor has evolved over the last 4.5 years. And I've seen the difference, what can actually change in a business, and how you can actually make this more scalable. So that's been a really interesting journey for me, which I'd love to share. But before we get to that, so Clothes Doctor started as a repairs and alterations business, so primarily focused on basically making it easier for UK consumers to get their clothes repaired, get them altered, make them last longer. And we started with an online platform to do that, and people would book in online. We'd send a courier to collect their items, and then a week or so later they'd have them back at their door, beautifully repaired. And then actually, like that one, exactly. And then what's been really interesting is actually, the journey that I went on when I was then pitching to investors, and thinking about where this business was going to go, and how I could see it becoming bigger, basically. And I feel as though I really learned a huge amount from the investor feedback and the things that they wanted to see more of. But then also I could see, as time went on, I could really see kind of where demand was, and I could adapt the business to make it more scalable. Actually, what we ended up doing is launching a products business on top of the services business. So we launched eco-friendly detergents and brushes and combs, and basically things that will allow people to mend their clothes and look after their clothes and clean their clothes at home as well. And that's been really successful because it's actually allowed us to scale beyond the UK, and it gives us this kind of global potential, which I guess we were always finding quite a limiting factor with doing repairs, in that, it's very difficult to go across borders with that. So yeah, it's been a really interesting journey, and I'm looking forward to sharing it with you in some more detail.
So cool. So I guess to that notion of, pitching investors, and, and it's something that, I know that, it's when you're a startup, you kind of do it multiple times, and, your pitch and kind of how you, I think beyond talking about yourself, talking about your business is almost even harder, because it's, it shifts and it changes. And I guess, can you elaborate a little bit more of, and maybe even, for, I think something everybody goes through in life, but as a startup founder, when you get rejected or you get really harsh criticism, that pitch of how you would sell a Close Doctor, how you would talk about Close Doctor, and even, some of the lessons you learned, good and bad, when you got some tougher feedback, I guess, what were some of those moments that kind of made you like, I need to like change the way I talk about this business? I guess my question is, how you started talking about Close Doctor back in the day, and what it was, the 30-second elevator pitch, or, for our audience that's doing Destination Zero proposals, a 60-second pitch. How did that, hi, I'm Lulu and Close Doctor how did that change as like your journey progressed? And, some of even how good or harsh criticism like affected that along the way. Because again, I think that something, everybody who's in the startup community, you got to develop a thick skin, because people can be critical, or people don't understand, what it is. So can you zoom in on that a little bit, if that question makes sense?
Yeah, definitely. No, it does. Well, the first thing I'd say is that my first pitch was terrible. It was a really like, I think I didn't really of actually what you need to do in a pitch, and what I completely missed when I was starting out, so kind of early 2017, is that people want to see your vision. And I think communicating your vision is a lot about imagining this business in 5 years time, in 10 years time. It's not that you don't need to kind of paint this kind of, crazy picture that you're going to dominate the world. But I think being able to show that you can see where this is going to go. And I think it's really important to kind of work out, first of all, who your customer is going to be. So that was something that I completely missed in my first ever pitch. Knowing that, who will this actually resonate with? Like, why am I making this product or service? Or, what is this for? Who is this for? And then trying to work out that type of person or business, if it's a B2B product or service, why are they going to want it? What's in it for them, and what's going to be the hook that gets them interested in what you're offering. And then from that, I think you can actually build up a sort of picture of what this business could be. Where is it going to go? Like, which countries are you going to be, just focusing on your domestic market? And that's totally fine as well. But, I'd say, talking on the theme of scalability, obviously being able to have something where the market could be a lot bigger and there could be a global potential for that product or service is obviously a really valuable thing. And that was something that investors said to me right from day one. They were like, how are you going to take this overseas? Where can you go with this beyond the UK? How is this, like, what repeatable process are you going to make in your business that you can then do in the United States or in somewhere else in Europe? Or could you go to China with this business and things like that? And it was a really hard thing for me to answer at the beginning, because I couldn't quite see how our business would actually sort of cross borders. So my first few attempts were pretty poor. I'd say also my pitch deck was was very basic. I hadn't quite got appreciated how to make things look pretty and kind of line things up. And actually the branding factor was something that I really didn't understand at all when I started out, because I come from a finance background and I was all about numbers, and I could work out what my margins were going to look like, and what the accounts were going to look like in 10 years time, but I didn't know what the brand was going to look like. And actually I would say, whatever your business idea, branding is just really important for any type of business, because it's a subtle thing. It doesn't have to be, with us, we have our Clothes Doctor brand, which is on all our products, and that's obviously it's a very obvious thing. Our branding is really clear, and it's always very clear on a product related business. But your brand can also be, if you're a service, if you plan to launch a service, your brand there is also important. It's what do you stand for? And actually, I think brand is a really important part of scalability as well, because that's something that will translate across borders. People can get a picture of your company from your brand, and I think that's something that everybody actually has to think really seriously about. And my first brand, the first Clothes Doctor iteration, was pretty poor, and we actually rebranded in 2018. And I'm really happy with our brand now, and I'm really happy with how it's growing and what it represents. But that was also an evolution for me, because I did not understand any of that when I started out.
I mean, I quite liked the old branding. I still have the cloth bag. I still have the cloth bag that you guys used to send out, so you could basically, when you kept using your clothes with the button logo on it. So actually, I still have that, and I still use that for laundry and such. So it wasn't that bad. It wasn't that terrible. I think it was great. It's a journey, isn't it? I guess so. Kind of going back, and so last week we spoke with Isel, basically, who was one of the last winners of the Destination Zero concert. She has this amazing concept of basically using just like next generation plastics for waste, and it's amazing. And she's also said, finding that delicate balance of having the idea be really beautiful looking and amazing, the branding to what you were saying, but also to also being really clear and getting to the point of basically explaining what your idea is, and I guess how it could scale. I guess if you had to say you're walking that tightrope or picking one, what do you think is more, and I think you've kind of already touched on this, but what would you say is most important when you're pitching, especially if you only have those 30 seconds or 60 seconds to catch someone's ear? What do you place a bigger premium on? Showing how your business can scale, or showing the practicality of it and landing that straightforward idea? I mean, I guess what do you think is more important when conveying that, of saying this is what it is, this is what it does, thanks, bye, or is it this is what it is, this is what it does, and this is how it's going to be in the next? What's more important? Are they equally important?
I definitely think it is of course really important for the investor that you're speaking to be able to understand the point of your idea. And I know every investor is different, so that is one thing I would say. People kind of will invest on instinct because they think that this product makes sense to them, but other investors will also appreciate that they may not be the target audience, they may not be the type of person who would use this product, but they can understand where it sits and what its desirability is. And I'd say, first and foremost, yes, you need to have something at the core which is valuable, which adds value in some way, but then actually being able to articulate how that is going to grow is also really, it's absolutely crucial. And I think, so for example, one of the early conversations that I had, apart from how you're going to take this overseas, where does this go beyond the UK, was we started off with a workshop with 5 seamstresses sitting in one place with sewing machines, with all their, all their needles and everything that they needed in a workshop, and all the orders would come in through the door. They would be distributed amongst the seamstresses, so they'd arrive, daily by post, and then they'd get repaired, and then they'd get sent back again. And the question that I got repeatedly from investors is, what's going to happen when this is 200 times the size? Are you going to have a factory with 200 seamstresses doing this? Where are you going to recruit those from? How are you going to, these are highly skilled craftspeople, how are you going to be able to find them in one place and get them into a building? You know, this is kind of by nature, it's the sort of craft industry, and actually your big challenge is going to be scaling that up and making that, you know, 10 times the size. And it was totally true. And that's what investors immediately could see, is that, you know, this wasn't going to be something which in its current form could be 20 times the size unless you sort of significantly changed how it was working. You know, making it a sort of factory floor is a very different proposition to, you know, 4 or 5 people working in a workshop together. And so I had a lot of thinking to do at that point, and I had to think, okay, should we actually change, you know, should we actually sort of decentralize this? And this is actually what we did. Should we decentralize it and have people actually work from home so that you can, you know, play the role of doing the fulfillment and actually sending parcels and receiving parcels, but kind of outsourcing it to people that you trust, who also, you know, are happy to work from home and things like that. And that was one option, or you had to make it into like a super efficient, you know, factory type of process where everything was divided by type of repair and put into piles, and, you know, there had to be a really efficient system. And I could see that. I could see that, you know, beyond a certain size, this wasn't going to be able to get bigger in its current form. And that was just a very typical conversation that I had with investors in, you know, the early days when I was first pitching.
Amazing. And by the way, for anybody who's just tuning in or joining us now on Facebook Live or on YouTube Live, we're chatting with Lulu O'Connor, who's founder of Clothes Doctor, as the second webinar in our Destination Zero series, on scaling and sustainability. And quick call out too for all the people watching this, we are going to have a audience Q&A section at the end of this. So do absolutely think of any questions that you want to ask Lulu, especially if you're going to be submitting for the competition, if you're a startup owner yourself and thinking about submitting or not, or if you just have a question in general. But definitely keep your questions in mind, and we'll definitely get to that in a couple minutes, and we'll let you play basically, and I'll essentially let your questions and play them back to Lulu. So let's definitely think of that for people tuning in and watching this. I guess, you know, and Lulu, for you, I guess, kind of continuing this, and you know, being in the startup scene is one thing, but then I think being in like the sustainable kind of category adds a whole nother layer to it, because there's so much about sustainability. You know, the startup scene in general, whether you're in, you know, Silicon Valley or the Silicon Roundabout in the UK and London, or you're anywhere in the world, the startup industry moves so fast, so quick. But I think like the realm of sustainability is equal to that, because there's just so much that we don't know. Things change, we learn so much. I guess if you had to kind of give, I guess, like 3 to 4 principles of advice, or kind of 3 to 4 things to keep in mind for people who are specifically in kind of like the sustainable startup category. Because again, I think there's one thing of being a startup, but then there's another thing being a sustainable startup who has the intentions to kind of move the needle, you know, basically making a bigger impacts on the climate or the world. I guess, like, what would be kind of those 3 to 4, you can call them variables, principles, or just basically things to kind of keep in mind, or like things that you've learned, that's kind of best practice if you're going to be a sustainable startup. And it's, you know, it can be things that about, you know, practicing what you preach, or things that you've learned that are kind of essential, like basically that you've heard from investors, that it's like, if you're going to go into this realm that you have to do this. What would be those kind of 3 or 4 kind of key reminders or things to keep in mind if you want to double down and be a sustainable startup and innovator?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting question. I think I've seen, just through my own network, a lot of types of sustainable businesses, and also depending on the type of business that you are, I think can massively affect kind of how you think about funding yourself in the future, how you think about growing your business. So for example, I think I almost see it like there are almost 2 types. So there's a type of business like ours, which is a consumer-facing, sustainable business, where what we're doing is doing something which has been done already, but making it sustainable. But we're not fundamentally kind of rewriting the rule book. So we are a consumer products brand predominantly. And we have a market. You know, we have we sell our products all over the world. You know, we're growing quite quickly and we generate cash, and we're not, as a result, needing to raise a huge amount of capital. And there are quite a lot of businesses out there like that, which are not your typical startups. They're more like an SME, to make the distinction, they're a company which is more self-funded rather than externally funded.
And
I'd say we're probably.
And can I interview, just for those tuning in who might be new to journey, what is an SME again? For those who don't know what that term is, an SME is
a small and medium enterprise. So it's just really it's a kind of distinction between the typical startup will have this amazing idea which potentially needs a huge amount of funding to make it work, and it could be something like, I've actually got a friend who does a business like this, which is they have and it's a seed-based plastic substitute, and it's an incredible product. But you can imagine it's kind of a heavy tech type of business, and they have raised so much money to build this thing, and it's building really well. But it's an idea, and it's sort of, you know, they've got 50 employees, and you know they're still kind of only just starting to make revenues. And you know, you can imagine that's a very, very different proposition to what we're doing, which is a sort of, you know, we're more of a steady grower. We actually have a product. We have multiple products which are in the market and selling.
Yeah.
But we haven't made that sort of huge leap that some businesses make. You know, you can the journey to making an actual substitute for plastic is an enormous journey. And I personally, I wouldn't be able to run a business like that. I think that's incredible to do, but it's you know, it's beyond me. And you know, it's basically a load of scientists and engineers who work at this company, and that's not me at all. But you know, I think it really depends on what your innovation is, how far removed is it from what's already out there. Because if it's, you know, if it's like ours, which is a sort of step further from what's already out there, I think then you can actually think about funding in a slightly different way. And you can think, okay, I could actually get this product to market, and I could actually start to, you know, generate sales without having to raise a huge amount of funding. And actually, for me, that was my preference, because it gives you a lot more control over the business, for one thing, and it gives you the opportunity to grow at your own pace. And sometimes I think, you know, if you take a lot of external funding, you know, you can end up, you're really, really tied to very, very ambitious targets. You know, you have to hit some certain sort of benchmarks that they set for you, that your external investors set for you, and that's a whole different sort of kettle of fish. So yeah, I'd say that there are that distinction is something that I would make right from the start. So I think when you're thinking about your idea, try and put it into that kind of mindset of, you know, how is there anything similar out there? Is it, you know, is it a completely different concept from anything that you've seen before, which is amazing if it is, but that obviously brings a lot of challenges, because things just small, like, or not small, but important things, but something that might sound small, like how are you going to price that product, you know, or that innovation. It's actually it can be a really difficult thing if you don't have another product out there or another service out there to benchmark from. And, you know, I've seen businesses which had amazing ideas, but were pricing it, you know, in a very sort of, so for example, I've seen a business which was making it was like a razor blade type model, and it was making an app which helped you know when to take your medicines. So it would like give you a notification if you were supposed to take your medicines and things like that. And I saw how this company they would charge a huge amount for the app, which you then had to download. And actually they made a small change to that model. They started making the app free, and then they used advertising to actually fund the app. And it completely transformed their business, and they were able to go from, you know, not really actually selling this service that they were providing to actually making quite a big market for themselves. And it was just that change in pricing that made it work for them. So, things like that. It is very challenging, I think, to make those decisions if you're designing something which is completely novel. So I'd say, yeah, that's a really important factor to consider.
Amazing. All such good advice. And I think, again, got 3 more questions for you on my end, and then we're going to turn it to the audience. And so again, everybody's tuning in, see lots of people shouting out from Armenia, see people shouting out from Saudi Arabia. Hello, Nepal. Oh my gosh, we have everybody. This is amazing. From Mozambique. Hello to everybody tuning in. So 3 more questions for you before we flip it to the audience and basically ask them to submit some questions to you. So I'll do this kind of rapid fire. The first question is, a lot happens in 5 years, and it's, half a decade seems like a long time, but in the startup world, it can fly by, and you learn a lot. If you could go back in time and have coffee with yourself as you were exiting the city in London in your finance job, and you were about to take the plunge, probably, I'm sure you were excited and scared, but if you could go back in a time machine and have coffee with Lulu 5 years ago, what would you tell yourself? Like, what piece of advice would you get, or basically what are the 3 things you would tell yourself to remember to keep in mind, to either keep going or things you learned? I guess, what would you say to your old self 5 years ago with everything you've learned on this journey?
Such a good question. I think I wouldn't say that I have regrets about the way I set up Closed Doctor, because I think that's very negative, but there are definitely things that I would have done differently. And I can see them clear as day now, looking back. But at the time, I feel like I was fumbling around in the dark, basically, and I was trying to sort of see what works. I was trying to explore the industry. And my approach was, when I left my job, I set up straight away, because I took the view that get out there and start operating and see what, you learn so much from actually being on the job and seeing the orders come in, and you can, get feedback from your customers and that kind of thing, which it did work. I did learn a huge amount, but I think I made some really key mistakes. And one of those was not getting enough advice from people who had done it before, whether that was people in similar industries or just other, founders. I think my network was very, very limited to city people when I left the city, and I didn't know any other entrepreneurs, and I didn't really get really good advice. And I also didn't have a great network of specialists. So one of the things I wanted to do was build a kind of an app, but it was a web-based app to help people. So actually customers could come to the website and they could place orders for repairs and alterations. And I wasn't able to find anything that I could buy kind of off the shelf that would sort of create that functionality. So I decided to build this whole project myself, or not myself, but get developers and build it all from scratch. And I was advised by a web designer, a web developer team that I spoke to, that this was the best way to go. And 2 or 3 years later, I realized that this was a big mistake. And actually, there are good products, off the shelf products, that I could have purchased or basically subscribed to and adapted slightly to my needs, which would have cost a fraction of the price that I ended up paying for the developers. And I think actually would have ended up with a better solution. And I really kick myself about that, because I feel as though I didn't take advice from enough people. I didn't quite work out who the real experts were. And I'd say that is a really, really important thing. I would really advise you to go on LinkedIn and look for people who are working in similar industries, and just reach out to them and ask them if you could have a chat. I just think it's so important, and having someone who can, give you that feedback. I also had really interesting feedback from a similar company that I got into a kind of dialogue with in around 2018. It was a similar business to ours. And he was really helpful to me, and he gave me some advice he was about 8 years further on their journey. And he gave me some really interesting advice about his company and what he wished he had and the challenges that he faced, which made me think about what Closed Doctor could look like in the future if I continued to go exactly down I was going. And actually, he encouraged me to slightly change direction and pursue a slightly different strategy, which I think has been much, much more successful. And that was a really interesting thing as well. And if only I'd spoken to him, back in 2017, I think it could have actually saved me a lot of time, and I could have got much quicker to that answer. So yeah, that would be my biggest piece of advice to myself then. Speak to more people, do more research, actually explore through expertise. And, when I was looking for web developers, I should have spoken to 10 web developers and got lots of opinions instead of just going with one and getting going and actually going down a path which wasn't right.
Yeah. I guess it's knowledge is power, but community is key, isn't it? So it's, you gotta have both.
Absolutely.
2 more questions, and these can be kind of more rapid fire. This is a 2-pronged question. What's along your journey? What's the best piece of advice? Speaking of getting advice, what's the best piece of advice you've ever gotten from someone else, and what's the worst piece of advice you've ever gotten where you're like, oh God, I'm glad I didn't take that?
I think I went to an event for female founders a couple of years ago in San Francisco, actually, it was just before COVID happened and when everyone was actually still traveling, and it was an amazing event. And I met all these incredibly impressive women who were like so much more impressive than me. And I learned, I mean, the event itself was about pitching, honing your pitch, and it was with a VC fund, and that bit was really interesting. But actually, the bit that I really enjoyed more was meeting the other founders and talking to them. And there was one really cool girl that I met who I asked her about her business, because she had actually got up and said, I think she'd done a small pitch that I had watched, and she said, well, we were doing this, but then actually we changed it slightly and we did this, and then we changed it slightly again and we did this. And she was making hair care products, especially designed for Afro-American hair, and it was designed to it was like a frizzies type of product, and it was an amazing product, I could tell. And she'd started off selling it in subscription boxes, and I went up to her and chatted to her afterwards, and I said, why did you actually change from doing the subscription boxes to selling the single product? And she said, well, we were just spending all our time packing these subscription boxes, and it's great, but actually the best product, the most profitable product in that subscription box was the shampoo bottle. So actually, I just thought, why not just take away the other products which are lower margin and just focus on the shampoo bottle, which is the really popular product anyway. And so she basically adapted her business to do that. And then she found this other product which she'd added to the collection, which was a little bit different. And I was asking her about that as well. And she was like, it's just a really great, it's really high quality product. It smells amazing. It's super profitable for us. And she'd changed her business twice to get to the one that it was now. And it was really, really selling really well. And she was making great profits on it. And I said to her, how did you see to make that change? And she kind of said, well, if you can see a category near the one that you're doing, which just looks better than the one you're doing, you should try and move into that category. You shouldn't just feel that you're blinkered and feel that you have to stick with your original idea, because actually this is just the beginning of your journey. This is the time when you can make those changes, you can adapt, and they're actually small. It's relatively easy to shift when your business is small, but you can't do that further down the road. So you need to find your niche, and you need to adapt, and you need to be comfortable changing. And that was just the best advice ever, because actually I think so many entrepreneurs actually end up failing because they can't see beyond their original idea, and they're so stubborn about their original idea being the best one that they don't look at those other nearby areas and actually find things which could be better than what they started off with.
Amazing. One one more question, and then we're going to flip it back to the audience. And if you have not submitted your questions yet, please do so, just so we can throw a couple in. I guess for everybody that's watching this and for everybody that is entering for Destination Zero, again, it's a youth innovation climate change. It's for the youth. It's for the next generation of climate changers and makers and doers out there. So a lot of people, and I mean, last year we had some amazing videos from people who were 18, 19, 20, 21. I mean, just the intelligence and the depth and the understanding of, this generation is incredible. But for people who, even if they're not that age, but they're just starting out, but if they are young, I guess if you're beginning your journey, what would be one sentence or one piece of advice, just even if it's really inspirational to remember, like if you were speaking to someone who was young and wanting to be a sustainable startup entrepreneur innovator, what would you tell them, this next generation, if whether or not they're based in Mozambique, they're based in Yemen, they're based in, oh my gosh, Morocco, Argentina, Mexico, all the places we got submissions from last year? What would you tell this next group or generation of climate change? Because this especially the younger generation cares so much, and they're so much more switched on, and so much more, I guess they get it. But what would you tell this next class of innovators?
It's so hard just to narrow it down to just one thing. I think I definitely, obviously, what we've talked about already in terms of finding, when you've got your idea, try and find your addressable market. So try to find who your customer is going to be and where you're going to sell that. But also in a broader sense, I suppose, or from a personal perspective, entrepreneurship is really exhausting and hard work, and it's the most amazing thing I've ever done, and I love it, absolutely love it. But it comes with, it's like this huge roller coaster ride of emotions, and one day you feel as though you're on top of the world, and the next day you're a failure, and things go right and things go wrong. And I think what will distinguish you, if it's really something you want to do, is sticking with it. And you really you can always find your way out of something that's gone wrong. You can always adapt your business. You can find a new channel to go down, or a new avenue to go down. I can't tell you the number of times I've been in that position where I've thought, oh my God, is this the end? And actually, no, it's never been. There's always been something that you can, something that you can change, and some way you can find your way through. And like I said, it's just one huge roller coaster, and it's amazing. But I would say just persevere with it. Don't give up, but don't necessarily assume that your original idea is going to be the one that, that takes you, all the way, because I think being adaptable is just such an important factor as well.
Oh,
sorry, that was 2 things.
No, it's inspiring. It's wonderful. I would love to have the courage. I don't really have the idea, especially after speaking with you. I certainly don't have the ideas of how to have my own startup, but it's the courage of people like yourself, but especially everyone who submitted videos last year and people who will be submitting videos this year, the courage that it takes. I admire it so much. We only have about 5 minutes left, so I'm going to flip it back. We've got a couple questions here, but again, if you want to ask a question, please submit in the comments. But we'll start with the first one from Julia. Julia asks, how do you make sure that when you're growing and you're scaling, how do you grow in a sustainable way? Like, how do you make sure you keep yourself accountable? Like, what are some, I guess, sense checks, or how do you grow in a sustainable way?
It's a really good question. I think for me, because we're still a really small company, I would say that the sustainability drive comes from the top. It comes from me personally. So I have this really kind of clear idea, I think, of what we can and can't do as a business, what our boundaries are. But at the same time, I guess I also try to be pragmatic, and there are some things that just aren't yet. So to give you an example, we have aluminium bottles for all our eco detergents that we make, and we use labels which we stick on the aluminium bottles, and we ship them out to customers. And the reason that I love using aluminium is because it is infinitely recyclable, so it's much more environmentally friendly than plastic. It has, it basically is a really pure material. So, and it is very, very easy to basically melt down and make into another aluminium bottle. There's no degradation as the recycling process happens. So they can be recycled infinite number of times, which is really important to me. But the labels that we put on our bottles when we first started they're compostable labels, which is great, but the customer needs to peel the label off and put it in their compost bin. And as time has gone on, I've realized that actually people don't want to do that. And I have been searching for alternatives. And I think I've actually just found a really good alternative of something that will degrade completely in the recycling process on the aluminium bottle. But it's taken me a while to find that perfect or that better, that optimal solution. And I'm sure that in future there will be more options as well, more eco-friendly options and things that I can continue to improve and make better. But I think you've got to be aware of the environment you're in, that not everything, you can't be absolutely perfect. You kind of have to do the absolute best that you can with what's available to you at the moment. And every time there's a new innovation, every time somebody comes up with, there's a company at the moment making paper liquid bottles which just break down within 6 weeks on your compost heap. And I just think that's the coolest thing ever. And I've been in touch with them and thinking about whether we could actually move to using paper bottles. It's like it looks like a kind of cardboard thing. But, it's not ready yet. And I think you have to try and balance out, you do what you can. If you've got your amazing innovation, you have to make it as sustainable as it can reasonably be with the resources that are available to you, because you have all these raw materials. You have to think about where everything comes from. You have to think about your carbon footprint if you're importing stuff. It's a very complicated process. And I think if you can keep that sort of sense of in your mind that what you should do and where you need to draw the line, I think that's the best you can really do.
Amazing. Well, and thank you for all of that. This has been incredible. I'm looking at the clock right now. We are out of time. So I apologize for everybody else who asked questions. We had a couple of really good ones. I'm really, really sorry. But again, whether you tuned in from Mozambique, I see Thailand, I see Nepal. We had an amazing Saudi Arabia. Thank you to everybody who tuned in today. And if I didn't shout out your country, thank you to everybody across the globe who's tuned in. Lulu, thank you so much. And you've been a tremendous wealth of knowledge. We'll post this video across British Council social channels. So if you missed something, if you want to listen to it again, we'll put it out later this week or next week so you can watch it. But again, Destination Zero, it's the next chapter. It's the next installment. Be a part of that next class of innovators, please. And if you want to submit your climate change idea via social media, you have your 60-second video that you need to post either on Twitter, on Facebook, on YouTube, or TikTok. And you have until next Monday to submit that. So please, 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 if you haven't already, start your weekends out, do some rehearsals, do some practice. And as we learned today, think about how your idea innovation, how does it scale? What's the long term? And I think, Lulu, you've been, like I said, a wealth of knowledge. Thank you so much. You are super busy, I know, but thank you for taking 1 hour out of your day to share your learnings and your sustainable golden nuggets. Thank you.
Thank you, Glenn. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, guys. And on behalf of British Council, thank you so much. Thank you also, too, for Chewing Rice, who I'm a part of, which is a creative collective that is basically pushing creative excellence through via social justice and kind of making a dent on both those worlds, because, again, the creative community desperately needs that as well. But on behalf of Chewing Rice, on behalf of the British Council, and, of course, on behalf of Close Doctor, thank you guys for tuning in worldwide. And we'll see you for Webinar 3 next week. But thanks so much, everybody. Have a great day and have a great weekend.
The Destination Zero competition is back. And once again, the British Council is calling all the innovators, thinkers, makers and doers out there to share your ideas and innovations on how to tackle the climate crisis. We first launched the competition in January 2021 and received hundreds of great submissions worldwide. Of those, we selected 10 finalists from the places where voices are often overlooked in the mainstream climate change conversation. These trailblazers were awarded a £5,000 grant and mentorship to develop their innovative ideas, and their journeys continue today. As part of the British Council's Climate Connection campaign, we're pleased to open Destination Zero once again, a youth innovation competition and a call to action for the next generation of climate change innovators on the front lines of climate change. We want to provide a platform where your voice and your ideas can be heard, seen, and brought to life. When it comes to climate change, we all share a common path, fate, and ambition. That is why we're looking to empower today's youth to build their own better future. So, what kind of ideas are we looking for? This time, we're targeting projects that help communities build climate change resilience in the following 3 areas: urban, innovations that help to transform slums into healthy, clean, and safe cities; rural, innovations that help rural farmers to adapt to changing climates; coastal, innovations that protect homes and businesses from climate disasters. Once again, we're looking to support the next generation of innovators, so you must be between 18 to 34 years old to enter. To enter the challenge, please share a 60-second video using the hashtag Destination Zero and hashtag The Climate Connection on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, or TikTok. Please be sure to clearly state your first name, age, and where you're from. Then explain your climate change idea or innovation. The competition is looking for ideas that tackle the 3 impact areas. Nothing is too big or small to share. The challenge runs from the 15th November to the 29th November, but we highly encourage you to submit as soon as possible. If you entered last year, you can submit again, but please demonstrate how your project has progressed, evolved, or moved forward since your previous submission. On the 11th December, we, with the help of a global panel of judges and experts, will announce the top 30 candidates and their submissions, who will be invited to share further information about their concepts. From there, we will select the 10 finalists, with the best proposals receiving a 5-month mentorship and financial support in the form of £5,000 to help bring the idea or innovation to life. Don't forget to submit your video by the 29th November 2021, midnight UK time, using the hashtag Destination Zero and hashtag The Climate Connection. Once submitted, stay tuned. Destination Zero, an innovation challenge from the British Council's Climate Connection, putting faces to the places at the core of finding real solutions in the climate change conversation. One world, one goal, infinite possibilities.